members of the Hells Angels motorcycle gang accused of running a racketeering ring, which included robbery, extortion, and murder.
From a man to a monster. These are the 10 most feared Hells Angels in U.S. prisons. Number 10, Paul Ice Kide. Paul Ice Kide looked like the guy next door. He wore suits, lived in a nice house, worked as a stockbroker. But when night came, he became something else. A full-patched Hells Angel in the Mesa, Arizona chapter. He had 2 lives. One with business meetings and clean credit. The other with fists, blood, and silence. On October 27, 2001, a woman named Cynthia Garcia walked into the Hells Angels clubhouse in Mesa. She was a mother of 6. She drank too much and said something she shouldn't have. She never walked out. Witnesses say she was dragged inside, beaten, and stabbed. Her body was found 6 days later, dumped deep in the desert. The government charged Paul Ice Kide with murder tied to gang activity, a crime that could carry the death penalty. Prosecutors called him dangerous. They said he should never walk free. But Paul didn't fit the mold. He had no past charges. He had a house, a job. No drugs, no drinking, no arrests. In 2003, the court released him while he awaited trial. He wore an ankle monitor. I was told to stay away from the club, but that wasn't enough. In 2004, he cut off the monitor, said goodbye to his girlfriend, and vanished. He received help from a fellow member and used a fake passport to flee the country. For 7 years, no one could find him. Then, in 2011, police caught up with him in Buenos Aires, Argentina. In 2018, he was finally sent back to Arizona. The stockbroker had become one of America's most wanted men, and when the law finally caught up, there was no more running. Ice Kide ran from justice for years, hiding in silence. But the next name on this list didn't run. He faced his enemies head-on and made sure they never spoke again. Number 9, Christopher Ranieri. Sometimes all it takes is one insult, one moment of disrespect. And Christopher Ray Ranieri made sure it ended in blood. Ranieri was the president of the Hells Angels Salem chapter in Massachusetts. He wasn't the loudest man in the room. He didn't need to be. His power came from silence, from the cold look that told you he'd do whatever it took to protect his rank. In July 2014, something happened that changed everything. Joel Doughboy Silva, a member of the Hells Angels Sonoma chapter in California, got into a public argument with someone from the Salem charter. They were at a motorcycle event. There were other bikers watching. Voices were raised. Tension snapped. In any other world, it might have been just a shouting match. But not here. Inside the Hells Angels, respect is everything. And Silva had crossed a line too, in front of witnesses. Not long after, he was invited to the Fresno clubhouse. The invitation was supposed to be about settling things, a meeting between brothers. But the second Silva walked through the door, he was shot in the back of the head. No warning, no second chance. His body was taken to a crematorium used by members, a place they called the Pizza Oven. That's where he was burned. His truck set on fire too. Everything was cleaned up fast, almost like it never happened. Ranieri flew in from Massachusetts to celebrate. But while the club was trying to erase the evidence, the FBI was building a case. It would take years, wiretaps, surveillance, testimony. But it finally cracked open. In 2022, the first trial began. Then, in 2023, a jury found Christopher Ranieri guilty. His charges weren't just about Silva's murder. He was caught in a much bigger web, a federal racketeering case that exposed deep violence, cover-ups, and club-enforced silence. He was convicted of assault with a firearm, witness intimidation, and even tied to the hours-long beating of a former member and the sexual assault of that man's wife. Today, Christopher Ranieri sits behind bars, serving a life sentence in a cold cell and a locked door. Ranieri silenced a brother, but the next one silenced anyone who got in his way. Number 8. Adam Lee Hall. Adam Lee Hall wasn't just another biker looking for status. He had already earned it. As a ranking member of the Massachusetts Hells Angels, Hall had power, influence, and the kind of reputation that made people think twice before crossing him. But in 2011, he crossed a line that even outlaw bikers don't talk about lightly. This wasn't about turf. It wasn't about club loyalty. David Glasser was a key witness set to testify against Hall in an assault case. Alongside him were two friends, Edward Frampton, a local drug counselor, and Robert Chadwell, a man with intellectual disabilities and a Special Olympics athlete. They weren't criminals. They weren't even part of the biker world. Their only mistake was being brave enough to speak up. Hall decided they wouldn't get that chance. On August 27, 2011, the three men were at Glasser's home in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. That's when Hall made his move. He and his associates shot all three men, but that wasn't the end. What came next was brutal. The bodies were dismembered, stuffed into trash bags, and packed into the trunk of Hall's Buick. Then they were driven into the woods into a remote area of Becket, Massachusetts. There, in a shallow grave, the victims were buried and left to disappear. But 13 days later, the grave was found, and the truth came spilling out. It wasn't just murder, it was a calculated massacre, and it shocked the entire community. In 2014, Hall and his two accomplices were all convicted of first-degree murder. Each of them received life sentences with no chance of parole. The judge didn't hold back. He called it savage, inhumane, and without any trace of mercy. While some dangers come from fists and guns, others come from a man who knows too much and decides to snitch. Number 7. George Weathern. He broke the code and lived to tell about it. George Weathern was vice president of the Hells Angels Oakland chapter, one of the most feared and powerful chapters in the country. Right beside Sunonny Barger, Weathern was in the inner circle. Trusted, respected, dangerous. But even in that world, loyalty has a limit. After leaving the Air Force, Weathern was all in. He handled drug deals, managed weapons, and helped enforce the club's brutal discipline. His 156-acre ranch in Northern California became a hub for activity, not just bikes, but business. Then the same ranch became a crime scene when 3 corpses were found. One was a woman. The other 2 were fellow Hells Angels members accused of going against the club. Weathern was in serious trouble. But he made the move no one expected. He flipped. George Weathern became the first high-ranking Hells Angel to turn state witness. In exchange for protection, he gave law enforcement what they had never had before, a look inside the club from someone who had been at the top. He told authorities about everything, including the murders and drug roads, and how the club operates. Later, he wrote a book, A Wayward Angel. It didn't hold back. It confirmed every fear cops had about the club. After testifying, Weathern vanished. The government gave him a new name, a new life, witness protection. He took his wife and kids and disappeared. No one has heard from him since. While some Hells Angels cracked under pressure, others helped the club grow stronger. Number 6. Robert Chico Mora. Before Arizona belonged to the Hells Angels, it was ruled by the Dirty Dozen MC, and Robert Chico Mora was the man in charge, so unpredictable that he was feared by friends and enemies equally. When Mora pulled the Dirty Dozen into the Hells Angels in 1999, in what's known as a patchover, it was more than just a name change. Arizona turned red and white overnight, and anyone who stood in the way was forced out or disappeared. Mora didn't stop at just patching over. He rewrote the rules. He ran drug deals, controlled weapons pipelines, and kept the fear alive in every corner of the state. And when the ATF launched Operation Black Biscuit, Mora was the primary focus. Federal agents believed Mora was planning to murder undercover agents he thought were rival bikers. He was putting together a crew with one mission: to kill anyone who came their way. But before he could strike, the government did. On July 8, 2003, the feds moved in. Dozens were arrested. Massive stashes of guns, explosives, and cash were taken. Mora was one of the names on the indictment. He faced serious charges, including federal charges tied to conspiracy, drug trafficking, and violent crimes. But then the case began to fall apart. Weak evidence and legal loopholes favored him. Mora ended up with a short sentence: 18 months for illegal possession of body armor. He walked free the next year, but his name still carries weight behind bars. While things were bad in Arizona, but up in Canada, they got even worse. Number 5. Maurice Borre. Maurice Borre wasn't just a Hell's Angel. He was one of the most feared men in Canada's criminal world. A former prison guard turned gang leader, Borre rose to power in the 1990s and led the Montreal chapter of the Hells Angels during one of the deadliest biker wars in history. That war was called the Quebec Biker War, and it was like a real-life battlefield. From 1994 to 2002, the Hells Angels and a rival gang called the Rock Machine fought over control of drug territory. But it wasn't just bikers getting hurt. More than 160 people were killed during the conflict, including innocent civilians. Even a young boy who died from a car bomb meant for someone else. Borre didn't just want control, he wanted domination. He ordered hits on rival bikers and even targeted prison guards and justice officials. In one shocking case, 2 prison guards were murdered while heading to work just because Borre wanted to send a message. That message: no one was safe from the Hells Angels. But the law finally caught up with him. In 2002, after years of wiretaps, undercover operations, and testimony from insiders, Borre was found guilty of murdering 2 correctional officers. He was sentenced to life in prison, with no chance of parole for 25 years. Even behind bars, his name held weight. He was a symbol of fear, loyalty, and absolute control. But time caught up with him too. In 2022, Maurice Borre died of cancer in a maximum security prison. He left behind a legacy soaked in violence and a warning of just how far power can go when no one says no. But while Borre ruled Canada's streets, there was someone else building an empire out west, a man who didn't just wear the patch, he turned it into legend. Number 4. Sunonny Barger. Sunonny Barger didn't just lead the Hells Angels, he became the face of organization. From a single chapter in Oakland, California, he turned a rebellious motorcycle club into a worldwide empire. And along the way, he became the most recognizable outlaw biker in American history. Born in Modesto in 1938, Barger dropped out of school and forged his birth certificate to join the U.S. Army at just 16. He was caught and kicked out, but that defiance never left him. In 1957, he founded the Oakland chapter of the Hells Angels, and it became the heartbeat of the club's rise to power. Under his leadership, the Hells Angels transformed from a group of local riders into a global force. They battled police, clashed with rival gangs, and showed up where few dared. At the 1969 Altamont Free concert, while the Rolling Stones performed, Barger and his Angels provided security. Chaos broke out. A concert-goer was stabbed to death. The event became a turning point in American counterculture, and the Hells Angels' reputation for violence was sealed. Barger's rap sheet grew alongside his influence. Drug trafficking, gun charges, conspiracy. In 1988, he was convicted of plotting to blow up a rival Outlaws clubhouse and served 4 years in federal prison. But when he walked out, it was with the same calm swagger as before, just another stop in a long journey. Then came cancer. He lost his vocal cords to throat cancer but refused to be silenced. Teaching himself to speak again using his esophageal muscles, Barger continued to ride, write, and talk. He published best-selling books, appeared in documentaries, and even had a cameo in Sons of Anarchy, blurring the line between myth and man. By the time he passed away in 2022, Sunonny Barger had spent over 13 years in prison and more than 60 years at the helm of an outlaw empire. Number 3. Thomas Heath. Thomas Heath wasn't just another outlaw. He was part of the Old Guard, the Ventura chapter, a name that meant violence. Even by Hell's Angels standards, Heath stood out for his brutality. His most infamous act came in 1977. When a bomb exploded at an auto shop in Los Angeles, the shop was reportedly owned by the rival Mongols Motorcycle Club. However, it didn't hit gang members. It killed a 22-year-old man and a teenage boy. Two people who had nothing to do with the feud. Just innocent lives lost as collateral. For years, no one was charged, but the memory lingered. In 1994, nearly 2 decades later, Heath was finally convicted of 2 counts of second-degree murder and sentenced to 7 years in prison. But the conviction didn't change him. If anything, it confirmed what many already knew. Heath didn't walk away from violence. He carried it with him. Even before that trial ended, his list of crimes had already grown. In 1992, he was convicted of assaulting his wife with a deadly weapon. He also threatened the witnesses. Another 7 years behind bars. By 2010, Heath was back in Ventura, this time living with a woman who eventually told him to leave. He refused, so she called the police. Heath was arrested again, but this time the law didn't blink. Prosecutors charged him with dissuading a witness and street terrorism, and with 4 felony strikes already on his record, the sentence was automatic. In 2011, Thomas Heath was sentenced to 35 years to life in prison. His lawyer tried to argue that the case had nothing to do with the Hells Angels, but inside the courtroom, it was everywhere. On his vest, in his past, in every word he spoke. The jury didn't just see a man, they saw the brand, so the verdict did justice finally. Number 2. Merl Heferman. They didn't call him a fighter. They didn't call him a leader. They called him the Fixer. Merl Heferman wasn't the kind of Hell's Angel you saw at the front of a brawl. He was the one they called afterward, when the damage was done and something needed to disappear. For decades, he was part of the Fresno chapter, and by the time the big cases rolled around, he was considered one of the most trusted men in California's Hells Angels scene. In July 2014, something went wrong inside the club. Joel Silva, a full-patched member from the Sonoma charter, had stepped out of line. He got into an argument with another high-ranking member, and in a world ruled by silence and loyalty, that meant only one thing: a cleanup was coming. Silva was invited to the Fresno clubhouse under the promise of a sit-down. Instead, he was shot in the back of the head by chapter president Brian Wayne Went. The murder wasn't random, it was organized, quiet, quick. And now they had a body. This is where Merl Heferman stepped in. The very next day, Heferman called Levi Phipps, the manager of a crematory in Fresno. He told him to leave the back door open. 2 men showed up with Silva's body. According to Phipps, one of them held him at gunpoint while they loaded Silva's body into the furnace. No trace, no funeral, no grave. Phone records later proved the call happened. Surveillance matched the timeline, and investigators believed this wasn't the first time Heferman had pulled off something like this. And it wouldn't be the last. In the years that followed, 3 more men connected to the Hells Angels disappeared. One was Robbie Huff, who had allegedly helped kill Silva. Another was Art Carasis, who went missing in 2016. And the third was Juan Guevara, a name that came out in court from Heferman's own lawyer. None of them were ever seen again. Heferman was never charged in their disappearances. But in October 2022, he was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison for obstruction of justice in the Silva case. Not for murder, but just for helping cover it up. Heferman cleaned up the mess. But the man you're about to hear, he was the mess. The kind of leader who didn't just order violence, he delivered it himself. Number 1. Raymond Folks.
Former president of the Hells Angels Sonoma chapter, Raymond Ray Folks, is charged with conspiracy, assault, and witness intimidation.
Raymond Rainman Folks led the Hells Angels Sonoma County chapter, a man whose name alone signaled power and retaliation. If someone stepped out of line, Folks didn't threaten. He erased. In 2011, he pleaded guilty to a multi-million-dollar mortgage fraud and money laundering scheme. Prosecutors revealed that he forged income statements, submitted fake bank records, and obtained fraudulent loans for high-end homes across Northern California. One property was turned into a secret marijuana grow. The money, cleaned through flashy purchases and a fake front, posing as the owner of a concrete business pulling in $24,000 a month. For that alone, Folks was sentenced to nearly 6 years in federal prison. He was also ordered to repay over $1 million. But prison didn't change him. When he got out, he didn't lay low. He doubled down. In 2014, the target was someone close, a former member, a man who'd crossed an unforgivable line by having an affair with Folks's common-law wife. So they set a trap. The man was invited to a warehouse. When he stepped inside, the doors were locked behind him. What followed wasn't a fight. It was hours of torture, beatings, pain, revenge. And when Folks was done with him, he turned on the woman too. Federal agents had seen enough. They charged Folks in a sweeping racketeering case that painted him as a key player in a brutal criminal enterprise. His name was tied to witness intimidation, illegal weapons, and organized violence. It wasn't just revenge. It was power used without limit. The jury delivered their verdict quickly. Folks was convicted of RICO conspiracy and assault with a deadly weapon. With a violent history going back decades, the court gave him the only sentence that made sense: life in prison with no chance of parole.